Hi, my name is Liang. I'm the composer of this new work written for Leland and Adria. Yeah, the piece is called A Kite Over the Grassland, and I'm here to talk about the piece a little bit. This is actually really the first time I met Leland and Adrian in person. We had a lot of fun rehearsing on Zoom, probably the most fun Zoom rehearsal I've ever had. And I realized that we had a shared background in Boston, even though I wasn't aware of it. Leland grew up in Boston, and I spent 14 years studying in Boston. What part of Boston did you grow up in?
Yeah, so I'm a Wellesley native. So I grew up kind of down the street from Wellesley College.
Yes.
I think I was really lucky to grow up in a community like Boston that has so much music and so much support for the arts. I think the first time that I was given your email, coincidentally, was by Dr. Kathy Chan, who runs the Foundation for Chinese Performing Arts in Boston, and she had sent me the music for another piece of yours for solo cello, Mongolian Suite, and had begged me to get in touch with you at some point. I was a little shy about it, so I didn't. But that was sort of the first time that those gears had started turning in my head about if I ever one day got to commission something or ask someone to write something. Your name was there in my brain. So I'd say that's where the beginning was. So I do owe Boston a little bit for that.
That's amazing. I'm so glad you mentioned Kathy because I think artists who had spent time learning music in Boston, a lot of them owe credit to Kathy. She really is the matriarch for Chinese artists and Taiwanese artists, Asian artists in general, and a lot of just new music. So I certainly, when I was a student, attended so many concerts that was sponsored by the Chinese Foundation. So let's really thank our regards to Kathy. And Adrian, where did you grow up?
I was born in Texas.
Oh my goodness,
and
okay.
I jumped around quite a lot. I was in Oregon for a while, Pennsylvania for a while, but I spent about 10 years in New York, and that's probably, or this is probably where I felt most at home for a long time. In the past 4 years, I've been living in Boston. So.
Yeah, I didn't realize at all because we really just met. But I spent the first 2 years after I left Beijing, China, where I grew up until I was 17. The first place I lived in America was Texas. Austin, Texas,
in
for
Austin,
2 years, and I loved it.
where I was, yeah.
Really? Oh, okay. And here we are, three of us, Texas, Boston, and then we're working on a piece inspired by Mongolia, which is really special for me. And maybe this part I should say a little bit of why I just had to write this piece. Since I was a child, I was very, very lucky that one of my closest family friends, my parents' friends, is the great Mongolian scholar Wulanji, who is 86 now. And I learned since I was a very, very little child growing up in Beijing, the long songs that he sang. He's really the foremost scholar of long songs and many subjects about Inner Mongolian music. And I found those music to be so spiritual. This is in the context of listening to a lot of music about the communist commune in Mongolia, or there's a lot of happy music, but I never really like happy music in general. So when Wulanjie sang those songs, even when I was still a kid, I realized how beautiful they are. They're usually, just the subject matters are very different. A lot of these songs are about missing home, about courage, about horses, about love of friends, and of course, love your mothers. And so the Mongolians probably were the most ferocious soldiers in world's history, yet the music they leave us oftentimes is filled with nostalgia. And that seems to be paradoxical, but when I think about it, yeah, it also makes sense because they're busy conquering the world. They're always away from home. So their repertoire is so rich with music missing home. And I think after leaving China, when I was 17, a high school student, I started to miss my home. And this music resonated with me very, very deeply. So some of the songs that I reference in this piece were taught to me by the great Wulanji, and they were taught him by his own mother, who was also a great singer. and the great Salashi, his teacher and mentor. In fact, Ulanji is the only person who learned these songs. That's why I feel very, very privileged to have learned this, even though I don't speak Mongolian. I do regard this music, the Mongolian long song tradition, to be one of the greatest traditions of melodies in the world. And that actually brings to the topic of why the piece is called a kite over grassland. I've never seen a kite in a grassland, so it's not meant to be a surrealistic picture. In every tradition that is rich with melodies, people have different metaphors to use to describe how beautiful a melody can be. And I learned from my teacher, Wulanji, he described melodies as a kite flying. And if you think about that image, it also makes sense. The vastness in Mongolia, just the space itself is enormous and seems endless. Yet at the same time, the movement of a kite in the sky, and it casts a shadow on the grassland. And when I was thinking about the two of you, certainly there's the voice that Leland is bringing into your cello playing. But I really didn't treat the piano as a piano. So just for this piece, you have to play it as if you're playing a dulcimer. So there's a lot of beautiful treatment of how you decided to finger the tremolos and the repeated notes. And on top of that, of course, Leland is, I think at this stage, you're really owning this music. There's just so much expressivity in your playing, and I just love it. I wish my teacher can be here to hear it, because I think he will not only recognize, but there's a deeper lineage that he will feel, finally, this music is finding its way to a concert stage that can be shared with people who otherwise would not have heard this. But the image of you singing with your cello and then casting a shadow that is sonified by the piano, it's an image that I have always wanted to create with music. I've been to Inner Mongolia and seeing how eagles and clouds cast their shadows onto the grassland. It's very, very beautiful. So thank you so much for realizing this dream of mine. What was it like for you to play Mongolia-inspired music? Perhaps for the first time, I'm guessing.
Yeah, credit where credit's due. I think there's an album for solo cello that came out the year that I was born, I think, by Yo-Yo, called Solo. And it has Brett Chang's Seven Tunes Heard in China, which I think has similar, especially the Pastoral Ballade in there, which is the sixth of the 7 pieces, which is my understanding. Very vaguely, I'm going to get this wrong on camera probably, but it is from Inner Mongolia or in that region. So there was that similar imagery. And I would be sitting in the back of a car. My mom's driving me around, CD players playing this, and so credit to Yo-Yo for so many things, but in particular, the way that he was creating sound on the cello in a way that sounded so vocal. And sometimes you hear, if as a cellist, I'll hear cello playing and I'll be like, oh, I could maybe manufacture what fingering or what bowing kind of created that sound, or how they're moving around in this way with, the usual instrumental music. But with the way that he was creating sound with that, I couldn't imagine, I couldn't figure out physically how he was doing it. So I think it was sonically this whole other experiment of, okay, that's how a voice could do it. Let's just figure out a way to do it. And so I think approaching this piece, hearing what you had said about sort of the vocal tradition, having had a lot of teachers growing up saying, oh, you play it like you sing it, and then trying to put those puzzle pieces together, I think led to hopefully something that sounds vocal at the very least.
Oh, I think it's very much so. Yeah,
I'm curious.
Very well. Yeah.
There are many instruments in the world to choose from. What was it about the cello or the piano or the combination that you felt could capture? Because you could just write for voice, I guess. I'm not a composer.
Well, I like impossible projects. So personally, yes, that is very, very challenging. And this music is not notated. The way I learn is by oral tradition. So I listen to the recording of, certainly I observe how my teacher, Leland sang these songs. But to capture that using notation to try to preserve every nuance in that vocal delivery, but try to write it for the cello, I think it's just a really, really interesting challenge. You mentioned car. You mentioned listening to Yo-Yo's playing. Of course, we all got to give credit to all these predecessors, Bryce Sheng for bringing this kind of. There are numerous Chinese composers who have attempted bringing this to our awareness. It's all beautiful, beautiful contribution. The enjoyment of singing in cars or listening to music in cars is not to be underestimated. I think of writing music, this type of music is very much like my way of doing karaoke for myself in the car, because I love doing that myself very, very often. I like to sing just because if I put something on, if my teacher is singing, I have that recording, I'll imitate, I'll try to learn, I'll try to understand the nuance, the ornaments. That's probably one of the hardest things to capture with notation. But on the other hand, it's also super fun to improvise. You do something else. So part of what you do is very much like myself singing karaoke, with the melody, and then what do I do if I want to add another voice to it that will shadow the melody? So it's a very interesting place to experiment composing. So probably that didn't come to your when you were thinking of listening to it, but it's actually an interesting creative space. Yeah. What about Adria? When you play, I did send you a recording at one point.
Did.
Was that recording helpful?
It was very helpful.
Good. Yeah, it's a recording of Mongolian dulcimer playing. So tell us a little bit about what that was like.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. It's because you're right. The piano really isn't a piano in this piece at all, and so it was an interesting experiment in which, basically, all technique that I had learned through the Western classical tradition was more or less useless.
That's right.
And so it was like, I mean, sort of what you were saying about starting from a sound and then figuring out how to create a technique that may get sounds. The piano is never going to be a dulcimer, but interesting to, I don't know, I spent time just sort of sitting there looking at the hammer hitting at the string and thinking about how to best approximate that sound or the physics of how that instrument might work, which I think is still a work in progress. It's something I'm having quite a lot of fun with. And then when you sent me that recording, it was so helpful to hear that it really is like a shadow. Those voices, the voice and the dulcimer, they're not necessarily interacting with each other so much as they are sort of just darting in and out. One follows the other, and they have their own sort of consciousness as they move and through space. And so it was a very different space physics to learn to move through, and that's been very interesting and very.
I love it. Yeah, I love it. First, I was really worried, just because making you play the piano as if you're hammering around it using dulcimers. I was worried that I will kind of make you develop tendonitis. And then to hear you play, there's so many artistic solutions, physical solutions that you introduce to the playing, altering the tempo, altering the hands, all these things. These are part of the creative process that you have to take into the realization that not only make it beautiful, but also physically possible to do this without a repetitive motion. So both of you have done this. In this music, in this particular context, we prioritize different things. Like on Leland's part, on the cello, some of those glissandos is approached very differently from, let's say, if you see that similar type of technique in a different piece. It's pitch to pitch, but here is a lot more about the gesture, the roundness of that gesture, the expressivity of that gesture. So those are the kind of things that I really enjoy talking about with you when we had that fun Zoom meeting, because this music takes us to a very different kind of relationship to what is that beautiful musical object that we're looking for. What is that sound we're looking for? How do we have fun with this kind of materials? So I just want to thank you for this opportunity that we only have one rehearsal on Zoom, and here we just recorded this piece, I think, perfectly. Other major reason that we're doing this is the Nuremberg Foundation that gave us a chance for the three of us to meet and create a piece that otherwise would not exist. So I think this is really wonderful, but also I felt it was meant to be because once I wrote this piece and hear you play, it's like, wow, even though I had no idea about these two incredible, brilliant artists, but this piece really should have been written for you. One thing I always emphasize when I give this piece to someone who doesn't know Mongolian music is don't treat it as instrumental music. Always think of it as vocal music. Anything you do is to be sung. I mean, it's taking cantabile to the extreme level. Approach the instrument, approach the cello. Also piano. Piano in its mechanism is almost like a percussion, but you have to approach it as if you're singing it all the time. No gesture should be angular. It should always be vocal. So that is what's the foundation of what I think this music is. So after we communicate that idea, I think it's all, it's just the orientation is completely different, and you approach these instruments as two vocal instruments, then you start to make a lot of sense. Maybe at this moment I can ask you, if you're going to coach this music, what kind of advice would you have for people who will play this piece?
I was actually curious because when I sit here when we play this one together, I've never had to watch what it's like for your hands to do tremolos either on single note or double note, whether you're switching or doing the same hand. Is that something, what was that process like for you to?
Yeah, I guess there was a lot of experimentation. I would say I spent a lot more time at the beginning not playing the actual notes that were written, but just tremoloing a lot in different registers around the notes that you had written, trying to figure out the best ways. I imagine it's going to look very, very different for every pianist who plays this because we'll all have different hands and different things that feel comfortable. So I wanted to feel like I spent the first few days looking at this of learning a new instrument rather than learning a piece, such that eventually when I came back to the piece, then maybe it would feel more idiomatic or natural for me to figure out the right solutions to get a certain type of sound. So a lot of experimentation and figuring out what works best for you and your hand and your ear.
Yes, that's great. And Leland, do you have some comments to make about the cello part?
As this applies to the piano part too, another person that the two of us have in common is Seth Knopp at Yellow Barn.
Yes.
I was coaching, I was playing a Schubert trio in a coaching for him once, and he referred to what was written on the page as cave drawings. And it was one of the most beautiful ways of explaining in a beautiful way that what's written on the page is meant to capture something. And it's a translation thing. So, there are limits to everything, but in that translating process, looking at the cello part is a lot about finding out how to do not just what's written, but everything that's not written. And so if that means playing a bunch of stuff with one finger, just to try and figure out, does that sound natural listening to that instinct? There are large slurs, there are small slurs, but, trying to do things in a giant bow, trying to split everything up, just to see, experimenting, similar to what you were talking about of, okay, does that sound vocal or does it sound like I'm playing a stringed instrument? Realizing that what the rhythm that's notated for a lot of the vocal sections is meant to capture a certain sense of space and time rather than a rhythm. And just sort of, just embodying that in my body and in my brain a little bit. I do, on a technical level, if this is interesting to any cellists who are watching, I do play with a bit of a flatter finger than I, we're told so much like, oh, you curl your fingers, have stability, strength. This one I actually will sometimes collapse this this joint closest to the nail to get sort of a wider vibrato and something that's a little less normal sounding. And then if I kind of move around on the cello on that one finger, then it all of a sudden gets further from cello playing in a good way, I hope.
I love that. I love that. That's a beautiful detail. I would not have known. Beautiful, yeah. And I'm also a big fan of Seth. Yes. Absolutely love him. So all these people I have to thank, from Kathy to Seth, and of course the Newmark Foundation that helped us realizing this dream. Thank you so much.